Bet you're wondering what happened to those burnt ends. So here today we've got a Jacks Creek Wagyu brisket. I'd say this one's probably about 7 kilos roughly, and marble score 8 to 9. Normally in a brisket, we look for not too much of a fat cover on the top side here. It just means less trimming, less fat, more meat normally. And a nice consistent flat. So on here you've got your flat, and up here we've got our point. So the point is what will turn into our burnt ends, and the flat will be slicing into slices obviously for our brisket burger. So we're gonna start by cutting open the bag. My favorite utensil, just a standard 6-inch boning knife. Now we've got our bag open, obviously. We've got looking at our brisket here. This one's got a nice fat covering on already, so it's gonna need minimal trimming. Point's gonna need a little bit taken off the top so it doesn't hit our top rack in the Traeger there, because it will puff up. You'll notice that when it cooks, it'll come up a little bit higher. So we'll get the trimming now. As I said, we'll probably just start by just taking this little bit off the top of the point here. So we only do this because it will puff up, and we're going to be using the top rack in the Traeger soon, and it will more than likely hit the rack. There's maybe a little bit of hard fat on this back side here, just here, which we'll just trim down. So just having a look, there's a little bit here on the end of the point. It's a bit thick, a bit thicker than what we would normally like it, so we'll just give it a light trim on this side here. That little bit of hard fat that was on the bottom side. This one, yeah, should almost peel off, but we'll just give it a quick trim. As I said, this is for burgers and point ends. So you don't want to trim all the fat off because, as we all know, fat is flavor and it is tasty when it's smoked low and slow. So just removing this little bit of silver skin, I think you would call it, it just gives you a nicer end product. So yeah, normally if we're just cooking this brisket to have for dinner or weekday lunches at work, whatever it is, I would leave it like this. But since this one, we are going to turn the point into some burnt ends later on, I will clean up from about here across, just so we get a nicer finished product for the burnt ends. And you don't, again, burnt ends, you don't want to be chewing on fat. It's simple as that. You want some nice little meat cube, and it'll be a delicious little bite. All right, so yeah, we're just going to clean up, as I said, we're going to clean up this point a bit. We don't want fat on top. The point is very well marbled already, so it's got a lot of intramuscular fat in it already. It's a big word for us today. So yeah, we don't want it. And plus, I said, like, it'll get a much nicer bark without all that fat on it. We do leave fat on the flat side. It is a little bit thinner, obviously, compared to the point, so it'll help protect it as well, and it just adds a bit more flavor to that end. So yeah, now we've got our point end all trimmed on top, so we can do our burnt ends. We've got most of the fat off. I left a little bit on here and there. That's not going to bother us for today for what we're going to do. It'll still bark up beautifully. Nice little bit of fat cover on the point end down here. That should render out really nice and be pretty tasty when it's finished. I need to knock the end off here, so we will actually just trim the end up just so it fits in the Traeger a little bit better. So now we're going to get on to rubbing this Wagyu brisket here. We'll rub the bottom side first, and we'll just go over the rubs real quick. This is my comp mix. I use this at competitions for my beef categories for all of them. The Seven Sins beef rub, it's salt and pepper pretty much to a degree, super salty, which for a really rich beef like this, well marbled beef, is going to be really good and tasty, because beef can never have too much salt on it. Our top coating will be the Wild Cow. Wild Cow is similar, it's salty as well, but it also has a coffee in it. So it will bark up nicely and give the finished product a really nice dark color on top. We're just going to flip this brisket over now. I always do the bottom first, because when we flip it back over, it's going to be on the table. And if you do the top first, all your rubs are going to stay on the table. It's not, it's going to be on the brisket. All right, so we're going to go with our first layer of the beef rub. Give it a, this rub is pretty salty, so depending on how salty you like your beef, you can go pretty hard or pretty soft. I like mine salty, so I tend to go pretty hard with this one. Now we're going to go for our second coat. As I was saying, this is the coffee rub. We will lose a little bit when we flip it back over. It's going to stick to the table. There's no way really around that. So we'll add a decent coat. Again, the other thing, if you don't like coffee, it does cook out and you can't really taste it, but you can go as light or as heavy as you like with this as well. So now we've got both our rubs on. I usually let them sit for 5-10 minutes. Just let the rubs start to set onto the bottom. So when we flip it over, it all doesn't fall off. Because if we flip it now, it will just all fall off and it'll be a pointless exercise. So now it's been about 10 minutes since we put our rub on. As you can see, I'll lift it up for you. The rub's set onto the brisket pretty well now. So it won't all fall off when we flip it over. So now we can flip it over and do the top side. And yeah, as I said, same as the bottom, we're gonna go for our beef rub on our first layer and then our wide cow rub as a second layer. We will go pretty heavy on the point end, just so it barks up nicely. With briskets, you can't hurt them really, so don't be scared to manhandle them. So if you need to lift it up, move it around, do whatever you need to get all the rub on it. Beef rub down first, now we'll put our wide cow rub over the top. So this is the rub combo I use. Being a competition cook, I've got a garage full of rubs and sauces at home at my disposal. This is my preferred combo to use. I use it on pretty much everything now that's beef. Not everybody will have everything that I've got at home, I suppose. So salt and pepper, if that's all you've got, will be more than adequate for this. We're gonna let it sit again, same as what we did for the bottom side. We'll let it sit 10, 15 minutes, whatever it takes for the rub to set in. So it's been about 15 minutes now. Our rub's set on the brisket nicely, so when we pick it up, it's not all gonna fall off. We're just gonna move it over to the Traeger Timberline here. We've got it set at 300, and we'll get her in and get her on her way. Okay, so now we've got our brisket in the Traeger over here at 300. We'll probably leave that there for probably the next 2 hours and won't touch it at all. After 2 hours, we'll start checking it for color, see how it's going, just general visualization. Probably, I would say around the 6 hour mark, we're probably gonna wrap it. But before we do that, your barbecuer's best friend, a Thermapen. If you want to barbecue, this makes life so much easy, especially brisket. It's not so much internal temperature of the brisket you want to go for, it's tenderness. If you don't have one of these Thermapens, the trusty old skewer. I keep one of these in my Traeger so I can probe my briskets when I'm cooking them. You can tell, it's just like, it's soft, it feels like the skewer going into butter, hot butter pretty much. It'll just slide straight in and straight out with no resistance at all. And that's when you'll know your brisket's done. After about 2 hours, you just make sure the bottom's not burning. Depending on what smoker you've got, some of them have a lot of heat from direct heat from the bottom, some don't. Some have heat from the sides if it's a pellet grill sometimes, depending on which one it is. So we'll just make sure it's not burning. If it is getting hot on one spot somewhere, we'll just rotate it around. So rotate at 180 or thereabouts, depending on what smoker you have. And then, yeah, we'll just keep checking it. Make sure it's not burning. That's the key thing. You don't want to burn your brisket. So we're back to our brisket. It's been about 6 hours since we put our brisket in the Traeger. Bark set nicely. We're going to check it now. We're going to bring it out, put it on our foil, separate the point, and cube that into some burnt ends. Wrap up the point, put it back in until it's nice and tender. We've got our brisket out of the Traeger now. It's been about 6 hours. Bark set nicely. Now we're going to separate the point from the flat and do our cubed burnt ends. So there's no real science to this. The easiest way I find to do it is literally just take the top of the point straight off. You're not going to get all of it, but you'll get a majority of it. Now we've got our point separated from the flat. We're going to cube this up into about inch cubes. We're going to put it in a pan with some sauce and back into the Traeger until they're nice and tender. Now we've got our brisket separated, we're just going to re-rub it at the top. I'm going to re-rub it with the rubs we used before and wrap it up and back into the Traeger. I'm guessing about 4 more hours until this is nice and done. So now our briskets have been in the smoker for about another 4 hours. I've probed them a couple of times now, and about half an hour ago they weren't too far off. So we're going to go probe them again now and see how tender they are. It's like butter, the skewer will just slide straight in, no resistance, and you know your brisket's done. So the burnt ends, we're going to take the foil off the top of the tray and we'll check them for tenderness as well. So they're bang on now, so we're going to pull all this off and give it a little rest. All right, so now I've got our brisket cooked. It's been in the Traeger for about 9 hours total, and this is a surprise now. We'll cut her open and hopefully it looks good. So I think we've done pretty good with this one. You can serve this as is now with your normal sides, coleslaw, potato salad, whatever you like. But today we're gonna make some brisket burgers. So I think that's a pretty good looking brisket burger. I bet you're wondering what happened to those burnt ends.